What's going on, and welcome back to another episode of The Mortgage Mindset. I'm your host, Trevor Otsuka. I am a licensed mortgage advisor with Baird Financial Group, and I lend on commercial, residential, and private money for fix and flip. Today, we are rocking a solo show. It is Friday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you. We're going to dive right in here. So for market update, the 30-year conventional fixed, we had a little dip. We had some market improvement. So last week, we were about 7 1/8 on national average. Right now, we are at 6.96%. 15-year fixed is at 6.41%. 30-year jumbo hovering right around 7.32. 30-year FHA and 30-year VA are at 6.33 and 6.35% respectively. Taking a look at econ data for this week, pretty active this week. We had the Fed Chair Powell testimony. That was a two-day event for Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we also had core CPI that came out on Wednesday. That was month over month and year over year. And the market actually had a negative reaction to that because they came in just a little bit hot. But then the following day, we had jobless claims for February with core producer prices month over month for the month of January. And then today, we had a nice little surprise with retail sales, which came in much softer than expectations. And the market rallied yesterday and then also today. So we are actually positive. It's the best that the rates have been since December 17th. So pretty good improvement when you take a look at it that way. So over the last 60 days, we are right back to where we were 60 days ago. For econ data that's coming up next week, we have a bunch of Fed speeches. FOMC minutes will be on Wednesday, February 19th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And then probably the biggest thing will be Friday, the 21st, which is S&P Global Services PMI, which is a measure of inflation. For this week's news article headline, I got this from Housing Wire, and the title of it is HUD announces launch of DOGE task force targets AFFH rule. So we're going to dive in here. The first thing we'll talk about is that HUD has launched a new task force in partnership with Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, to review and streamline the agency's spending. This is part of a broader initiative under President Trump's executive order to reduce federal workforce numbers and maximize governmental efficiency. HUD claims to have already identified over $260 million in savings, though specific details remain undisclosed. Mass layoffs and potential impact on housing programs. Reports indicate that up to 50% of HUD's workforce has been cut, which could impact essential services, including civil rights enforcement, housing market data collection, and disaster recovery funding. This reduction may have long-term consequences on housing accessibility, affordability programs, and fair lending enforcement, potentially creating challenges for homebuyers and agents working with underserved communities. Recession and the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, which is also called the AFFH rule. It says HUD Secretary Scott Turner announced plans to rescind the AFFH rule, which requires local governments to assess and address barriers to fair housing. This marks a significant policy shift, with Turner emphasizing that zoning and housing decisions should be left to local authorities rather than federally mandated. Real estate professionals should monitor these changes as they could impact local housing development, property values, and accessibility initiatives. I'd love to hear you guys' input on this. If they're going to turn over this rule, instead of it being monitored by the federal government agency, instead turning it over to local authorities, which would be cities and states. So I'm curious to see how this is going to impact the market. And then, obviously you guys are seeing in the headlines and probably all over social media about DOGE and all of the unnecessary governmental spending that they have been cutting. Who knows how accurate it actually is, but it's definitely interesting when you look at it from a 1,000-foot up view to see just how all of our tax money has been being used over the course of the last 10 years, which is pretty crazy to think about. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of The Mortgage Mindset. I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a very, very blessed Valentine's Day, and we will see you guys next week.